Well, you're still with Alec Hogg here in Davos, and we have the Vice Chancellor of Wits University, Professor Zeblon Vilakazi. Lovely to see you here, Prof. Just give us some insight on what you expect to take home.
Lovely to see you too. Thank you for the opportunity, Alec. I think that the World Economic Forum was started by an academic, Klaus Schwab, to give a different perspective of how you can achieve different perspectives of solving global problems, global emergencies. And at the heart of that, of course, is the higher educational sector. As you know, I will be participating here as part of the expert forum on higher education to discuss, among others, the jobs of the future, the economy of the future. As you know, it is at the WEF that the whole concept of the fourth industrial revolution was almost put together by a group of academics that Schwab had put together to kind of help with how to put one single expressive term for this digital explosion that they called here at WEF the fourth industrial revolution. So I think there's a part of an ongoing conversation among the university directors, presidents and vice chancellors across the world. So it's my privilege to be here representing quite a few institutions within the African continent to have a place at the table where we can express our views regarding how these changes in education, teaching and learning and jobs of the future will impact us in Africa.
Yeah, it's an incredible place to learn, isn't it? And the WEF is particularly good at looking into the future, or at least trying to give us some signposts into the future.
Indeed. One thing we've been good at, I'm talking here as universities and as learners, we haven't been able to prepare for that future, right? We know how to respond to it when, for example, online learning happened because of COVID, but we really weren't prepared for it. We had to learn on the fly. So we don't know how to prepare people for the industry of the future. So that is one thing that us as academics have to learn, or let me say as university administrators have to learn to manage this exponential, how it will impact on how we educate the future generation. And I think that's where we find ourselves quite wanting, because we always say, oh, this is what has happened. How do you rejig our curriculum? And I think it's something that I'm here to learn and see how our peers across the world who are facing similar problems are thinking and trying to adapt to this new reality.
And we must not underestimate that. I remember meeting with a professor from Northwest University at Davos, and she said, you and I, i.e. journalists and academics, are the only people who have time to research and learn nowadays.
Correct. And that's a privilege, actually, of being in that space, that you are able to basically get off the treadmill, right? Take a pause and think about that. But the thing is, we can think and reflect about it, Alec, but my challenge is, are we responsive enough? Because universities, by their very nature, are quite Byzantine. I mean, they were actually founded as theological seminaries in the Middle Ages, and they, just like political structures, they have all these policies, rules, procedures, and statutes that don't allow them to move at the rate at which the current digital exponential is moving. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, because you need to maintain that rigor, that institutional element of respect for the process. But how do you adapt and learn how to do things, as they say, on the fly, without compromising the rigor of the entire academic process? So those are the kind of challenges that actually, you're right, we can think about, but it's actually doing. I think academics don't do much, they think much. So you need to now start doing, like people in the real world.
Prof, an interesting question to close off with. There's a lot on social media about the World Economic Forum being a bad place, not a good place. And I'm sure many of your students at WITS are reading that stuff and believing it. How would you address those questions?
Well, the beauty of being in an academic space in a democratic society, which guarantees institutional freedom like we have in South Africa, because that is actually in our constitution, and that academic freedom and institutional autonomy is central. That means that actually part of our job is to contend and deal with those criticisms. You have to allow them space and time. As I walk through here, part of us living in a democratic world is, you saw that there were protests yesterday, and they should express themselves, of course, in the parameters of not, intimidating others. And I think it's very, very important that even us who are delegates here, hear the other side, our the Altem party, we must hear why don't people like the forum, and therefore how can the forum, using that mirror that doesn't tell us a pretty picture, forces us to think out of these lofty academic and intellectual spaces that we find ourselves in. That, is this the way to address global problems? Yes, it is. How can we improve? So I think, to me, this kind of criticism in a democratic society that allows for free thinking is welcome, and we just need to, obviously, by shutting yourselves out of the forum, you also are not able to solve problems. By the very nature of these multilateral institutions, they are not perfect. They're not the panacea. But if you don't have the forum, if you don't have the UN, if you don't have the World Bank and anything like that, what else do we have?
Professor Zeblon Vilakazi is the Vice Chancellor of Wits University. I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.
Thank you.